Hey guys, it's Quinn, and today we're going to be taking a look at Roger Moore's last outing as Bond in what I believe to be the most bizarre Bond film in the series, A View to a Kill. After the absurdity of Octopussy 2 years prior, Bond producers decided to hold on to Moore for one more go-around. Would they go ridiculous like Moonraker, serious like For Eyes Only, or try to hit it somewhere in the middle like The Spy Who Loved Me? Well, somehow this film hits none of those marks and goes completely rogue in what is appropriately an absurd last film for the most absurd Bond actor. Let's crack at it in the seventh and final hot mess of a film for Roger Moore, A View to a Kill. After a typical gun barrel and a PSA about how Zorn isn't a real person or company, which always kind of freaked me out as a kid because of just how serious it was, we cut to Bond bone digging for a chain with an apparent microchip on it. I wonder if this Zorn company has anything to do with this microchip, but we will see. What follows is a typical pre-title sequence with some absolutely wonderful music from John Barry. All is going normal until exactly 3:30 in this film, where the first of many confusing events occur. Bond takes out a few people with his ski, which in itself doesn't make any physical sense, and then we start jamming out some Beach Boys. Bond blows up a helicopter using a flare after the helicopter lightly touches some ice and goes off like a nuclear bomb. Bond escapes in a ship shaped like an iceberg, where he takes off his jacket and reveals a 56-year-old Roger Moore who looks way too old for this scene. I'll discuss this more later, but Roger Moore is simply too old looking in this moment for it to seem realistic. It almost takes you out of the film, and that is a problem throughout. Anyways, Bond makes out with the girl half his age, and we're off into the theme song. I was watching this with my friend, and he simply just looked at me and said, "What the fuck is happening?" I don't know, Ethan. I don't know. After my favorite theme song in the series, we are off to the races with this film. After a really kind, lovely scene with Moneypenny, which works well because both seem the same age, so it feels right, we have a typical M scene, analyzing the microchip Bond got in the beginning of the film in Russia and comparing it with a microchip created at Zorn Industries. See, the name is already in the film 11 minutes in. MI6 realizes they are the same. This is important because it means that the microchips made by Zorn Industry, which is a contractor for the British defense, has been leaked to the Russians because they found the chip in Russia. Now, these chips can survive a nuclear blast, so if the Russians have them, then, I guess that's bad. One thing is for sure, it is less convoluted than Octopussy, so let's celebrate that. Bond and the old motley crew all go off to the horse racing to spy on Zorn himself, played by Christopher Walken, who is being accompanied by a lady called Mayday, played by Grace Jones. When I say this film is weird, that's what I mean. This scene is interesting because it sort of polarizes the old school Bond and his crew versus Zorn and Mayday. Everyone that Bond is with, including Bond himself, all look like they're in their 60s plus, whereas Zorn and Mayday appear in their 30s. In a way, it's fun because it's as if the old men are coming out of retirement to beat down the young rascals of Zorn one more time. And if the film played like this, that would have been awesome. I'm going to talk about it later with Bond and Stacy, but that should have been a theme that they carried throughout. But the entire film acts as if the MI6 crew and the young people are equals, and it just feels wrong. It is also here that we meet one of Bond's best allies in the series, Tibbet, a horse racing expert who is amazed at how quickly Zorn's horses are able to run. Bond goes to Paris to meet with someone who has information about Zorn when this person is killed by Mayday. We then get one of the most ridiculous chases in the series around Paris. After some great camera shots, which you can tell feel like they are designed for trailers and posters, Mayday jumps off the Eiffel Tower in what is one of the best stunts in the series. Bond pursues in either the world's weakest car or toughest, seeing as it keeps driving no matter what happens to it, but Mayday gets away. This scene is tough for me because on one hand the action is great, it doesn't feel as intense as it should. It feels like the chase is between two people who have no connection up to this point in the film, so Bond going to such lengths, it doesn't feel right. In Skyfall, a similar chase occurs, but the importance came from the fact that M is literally telling Bond that he has to catch this person. Here, there's no real, person in the back telling Bond he needs to do this, so it doesn't feel like there's much gravity to the situation. Bond and Timmett go to Zorn's horse show to investigate the horses more. It's funny, for a film about microchips, it's been 25 minutes, and it's all been about horses, but hey, who am I to talk? Bond pretty much just starts hitting on people for the next 10 minutes, with one beautiful moment as Bond uses some Q-made glasses in order to spy in on Zorn and a lady. The glasses reduce glare. That's it. Bond, out of every gadget ever, exploding pen, attaché briefcase, whatever, brings glasses that reduce glare. Why? I don't know. Bond goes into Zorn's quarters to discover that the girl he was spying on got written a check by Zorn for $5 million. We also meet Zorn's father, a former Nazi scientist whose talk of breeding superior horses sounds an awful lot like fascism. Bond has an awkward encounter with Zorn that is extremely reminiscent of the news meeting Bond has with Carver in Tomorrow Never Dies. Bond and Timmett go and investigate the horses later that night and find out more or less that Zorn used a microchip to keep his horses from getting tired. They also find out that Zorn is stockpiling a world supply of microchips. Then this happens. Bond barely gets back to the hotel room, where he then shags Mayday with Zorn's approval. I don't know what I'm watching, and writing notes about this film has honestly been an experience for me up to this point. We will grind through this, though, folks. Think of this as like team bonding, trudging through the rough now, so when the film picks up, it'll be that much better. But more bad news. Tibbets gets killed, which is a shame because he was the best part of this film up to this point. Bond goes for a horse race with Zorn, and after surviving the most violent race in human history, Bond is chased into the forest by a few of Zorn's assassin friends. Bond gets captured and thrown into the car with the dead Tibbet to be drowned. This scene is actually great and one of the best in the film. Bond wakes up as the car is sinking and sees that Zorn and Mayday are waiting outside to kill him if he comes out of the water, so Bond stays underwater. So he takes air from the tire to wait it out. It's a very clever little scene and shows a lot about how Bond as a character can be smart in whatever situation. It's small, but I really like that they added these little details here. After a verbal beatdown from Gogol, we have a complete change of scenery as Zorn has a meeting with a bunch of industrial leaders talking about microchips. He says that in order for them to have a monopoly on microchips, they need to take out Silicon Valley. One person immediately says no, so they get assassinated by being thrown out of a blimp. A blimp.
Wow. What a view. To a kill.
Why? Just why? It turns out Zorn is the brainchild of the Nazi scientist from earlier who created him with a ton of steroids in a concentration camp. That explains why he's crazy, apparently. Bond decides to go investigate Zorn's oil fields in the Bay Area, where they are testing out some of the engines. Bond almost gets killed, but survives, breaking one of the turbines in the process. Another Russian agent there gets killed, whereas Bond escapes with another Russian agent and just goes to town. As in goes to San Francisco. And has sex. I'm bored. I'm sorry. Moving on, we're only halfway through, so let's keep the grind up, folks. God, okay, so the Russian lady gets picked up by Gogol so they both can listen to the tape that the lady stole from Zorn. What is weird here is that as she's running up to the car, the person picking her up is clearly not Gogol, but a random guy, whereas when they do the close-up shot, it's Gogol. Why they went through the effort of having a stunt double for this, God only knows. Anyways, Bond switches the tape with her so that he now has it and she has a music tape instead. Bond takes that recording and figures out that Zorn has a plan of sorts called Operation Main Strike, which is to occur in 3 days. At City Hall, Bond runs into Stacy and follows her all the way to her home because he's a charmer, not a stalker, I guess. After an honestly great fight between Bond and a few of Zorn's men, Bond makes quiche. Stacy doesn't know what quiche is, though, so you can imagine that she has got to have that same brain power that Octopussy had last film. It's around this point in the film also that Bond becomes very much a sort of father figure for Stacy. He makes her food, guards her, cleans up her house, fixes the telephone. He's generally just caring for her. On top of that, during the fight, Stacy uses a vase with her father's ashes to get rid of a guy, to knock him out. It's almost like she was sort of passing that baton off, basically getting rid of her old dad and now having Bond to protect her now. And this route in the film of Bond being her father would have been brilliant, especially because they probably knew going into it that this was going to be Moore's last one. To sort of capstone it with Bond actually caring for someone instead of just shagging them would have been a refreshing idea. It's sad that all this goes to hell relatively quickly, but it's just something that would have been really sweet, and it was while it lasted. Anyway, Zorn has been pumping seawater into his oil pipes to test them for leaks, which, according to Stacy, can cause an earthquake. When she confronts her boss at City Hall about this, she gets fired. Bond and Stacy go back to City Hall that night to see how many mines Zorn owns, to see how much damage he could do if he triggered an earthquake, because if he did that, then he could flood the area, in particular Silicon Valley. Zorn and Mayday show up, and after killing the head of the mining department, they lock Stacy and Bond in an elevator and set fire to the building. In probably the best scene in the film, Bond and Stacy escape the elevator right as it is breaking. Stacy keeps screaming at Bond, which is very annoying, but the action itself is extremely cool, and Bond is being a stud in this moment. I know I've been shitting on this film a lot, but I do have to give credit. Bond acts more like a man in this film than any of the films prior, since maybe The Spy Who Loved Me or Diamonds Are Forever, which is a thing that I love. Bond is about escapism, the films are, so the more of a stud Bond himself acts like, the better it is. Him carrying her down the ladder was particularly great in this scene. Bond escapes in a fire truck after the police are about to arrest him for the death of the mining department head, which Zorn framed him for the death of. Bond has to lock the escape ladder on the truck, but gets caught as it starts swinging around in yet another great little bit. Bond gets over a bridge in the fire truck and proceeds to go to one of the Zorn mine shafts near the San Andreas Fault. Inside the mine, Bond discovers that the mine is filled completely with explosives, with a massive bomb being placed on it. At the same time, Stacy discovers that the explosives will trigger a massive earthquake that will flood all of Silicon Valley. Mayday and her people give chase as Bond and Stacy run off, as Zorn locks down the mine so no one can escape, including Mayday, Stacy, and Bond. This is where things start to get interesting. Zorn blows up the mine shaft, which floods it, and then proceeds to mow down everyone in his path. People are getting crushed, electrocuted, shot, and Zorn is literally just laughing his ass off. It honestly might be the darkest moment from any villain or character in the series, and for such a silly film, it's interesting that this turn to dark occurs. I personally find it makes the film very interesting. For the rest of it, it's kind of boring. It's kind of weird. Bond and Mayday get trapped in the mine shafts together, and after she realizes that Zorn double-crossed her, she switches sides to help Bond defuse the bomb. Bond and Mayday together in this scene are actually really cute together, and I like seeing them work together. I just think it's really nice. Seeing Mayday get upset seeing her friends dead in the shaft is also very humanizing, which I enjoy. A lot of these films, these characters don't seem like real people, so the fact that they give her so much character in so little time is touching. As Bond and Mayday work together to get the bomb out of the mine, Stacy gets kidnapped because a fucking blimp sneaks up on her. I told you she was stupid when she didn't know what quiche was, seeing as she's a classy 30-year-old lady. Right before this, though, Mayday rides the bomb out of the mine shaft, giving Zorn eye contact as she blows up with the bomb, and probably the most badass death for a henchman in a long time. Maybe the guy in Fear Eyes Only gets pushed off of the cliff, but either way, this is a great send-off for Mayday. Bond hangs onto a rope on the blimp that Stacy gets kidnapped on. When they fly over the Golden Gate Bridge, Bond ties the rope he is on to the bridge, causing the blimp to get stuck. Stacy just kind of goes rogue inside of the blimp, and Zorn gets really pissed off, so he goes out with an axe to kill Stacy and Bond that are now out on the bridge. So imagine this, a 56-year-old man protecting a girl versus a 35-year-old with an axe. It's a cool fight, and the location is brilliant to have a fight on. It's just the actual competition doesn't feel realistic. Bond wins, though, shocker, as Zorn falls off the bridge laughing in the most Christopher Walken-esque death imaginable. The scientist goes rogue and decides to kill Bond with dynamite, but whoops, whoa, he slips and blows himself up. Stacy and Bond get off the bridge and live to die another day. Bond and Stacy shag as Q creeps on them with a little robot. It's creepy, and I think that Bond served better in this film as a father figure, so I wish that they just cut out this entire scene. Besides, Bond keeps saying weird things about his jockstrap, let's say. Anyways, Bond goes rogue with a girl one more time, and that is A View to a Kill. A bizarre clusterfuck from beginning to end.
Are you all right?
The bubbles tickle my Tchaikovsky.
A View to a Kill has been one that I've consistently disliked, and I don't think that that has changed that much this time around. This film is extremely slow and takes a ton of time for anything to happen. The entire scheme with the horse steroids thing was such a stretch that I'm shocked that that became the real centerpiece of the film. The overall plot of flooding Silicon Valley felt very reminiscent of Goldfinger, and a lot of the plot just felt like it dabbled from that film. It made everything feel cheap. A great example of this cheapness is when Bond and the Russian agent are in the baths in San Francisco. This scene is straight up copied in Austin Powers' film Goldmember. Those films are parody films. They make fun of Bond films, but A View to a Kill just straight up does a lot of these cheesy things. And that's not to say corny is bad. On the contrary, corny is good. I love Roger Moore for this very reason, but the camp works when the film is played seriously. Octopussy is a great example. Bond is extremely loving yet serious throughout, and he interacts with the goofy things around him as if they were normal events. In A View to a Kill, he knows it's stupid and doesn't really treat it another way. Moore's performance in A View to a Kill was good. That isn't the problem. The problem is the entire atmosphere around him. And this atmosphere is probably my biggest beef with the film. It's that this film really doesn't have much of a direction. 1 minute it is very creative, like during the scene when Bond is drowning, or the one where he's escaping the building. But the next instant we are in a blimp, or watching Bond, go after someone who's half his age, and it's working. He's actually, scoring, right? It feels wrong. And a small thing that really bothered me is the editing in this film. You can just see when footage was cut there, or random jump cuts here, zoom and speed ups. It doesn't really work. And this entire film is weird as a whole. Back in the day, I made a ranking of the most bizarre Bond films, and this one was number 1. I pointed out scenes throughout that did not feel right, but on top of that, the editing, the cast, Roger Moore being 56, the score and the pre-title sequence, none of it felt right. And that is not to say that this film does not have good parts. Roger Moore acts like a real man in this film. The rest of the score was fantastic. Grace Jones and Christopher Walken were absolutely insane, which was fun, and the final 20 to 30 minutes of this film really did pick up and were exciting. Although this is definitely outweighed by the film's problems, I did enjoy these parts a lot, and they do deserve credit. But overall, this film is average yet forgettable. Something is off, whether it be the age, the awkward pace, or the lackluster plot. This film just didn't gel. It felt very slapped together, like as if they were just writing one more for the road, which is, a shame. They had to have known that Roger Moore was retiring, so if they had, at a very minimum, stuck with the father figure aspect, that would have been so nice. They were lazy about it, though, and didn't go with this and many other things, which I think just dragged the film down. My thoughts are this. Skip the film, but if you want to watch it, there are some things to enjoy. Roger Moore deserved better, though, and Octopussy was a proper film for him to finish on, not this. So, yep, that's it. That's the Roger Moore era, which took me probably 2 years to get through. Next time, we're going to be looking at the first of 2 very underrated Bond films from Timothy Dalton. The first, of course, being The Living Daylights. So what are you guys' thoughts on A View to a Kill? How does it stack up against the Roger Moore era? Whatever it may be, leave it in the comment section below. And as always, like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.
The name is Bond. James Bond.
Is he?
Are you?
Yes.
And I'm Dick Tracy, and you're still under arrest.